Dawn comes later and later. Dusk comes sooner and sooner. We know in our heads that it will turn around and go the other way, but a little part of us wonders if the light will just go out. We need to recall what we have known before. Pearl Buck said, "I feel no need for any other faith than my faith in the kindness of human beings. I am so absorbed in the wonder of the earth and the life upon it that I cannot think of heaven and angels." Our faith is found in the rhythms of nature, not only there, but in the rhythms of human life. And while, as Emerson said, all that I have seen teaches me to trust in all that I cannot see, we should remember that faith is a fine invention when gentlemen can see, Emily Dickinson put it, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. Faith and knowledge, intimates, lovers, partners. On this first Sunday in Advent, it is with knowledge of the past that we extend our faith in the future. And so now Tatum Fettig will kindle the first of our Advent lights, the candle of faith.
Please join me in the responsive reading. May our faith be a gentle and courageously chosen way.
For faith cannot be the source of spiritual comfort.
Faith will indeed bring us closer to shalom. But faithfulness asks us to wrestle honestly, to question, and to doubt. Let us not be tempted by a faith held without this struggle. May our faith be one that is ever renewed and ever renewed. Good morning and welcome to Fountain Street Church. My name is Jean Reed Bailey, and I've been coming to this church for over 40 years. I was married here in 1973, sang in the choir. I have wonderful memories of being in this church. I'm speaking to you this morning about giving, and I thought I would start with this incident that happened this week. Every season I go through my closet and see what I can live without, and I donate items, especially clothes, to a variety of institutions. Many people do this. So it includes deliberations like, where's this going to go? It's not just giving it away, but I'm also deciding where it'll be best used. A navy wool skirt, the Women's Resource Center, a purple fleece jacket in the image, a still serviceable set of sheets, the Green District here at Fountain Street Church, collecting items for people in need. So this past week, I noticed a new wrinkle in my purging of my closets ritual, and kind of an odd shift in feelings. I took a sweater that I wasn't quite ready to part with yet, and I held it in limbo for a good part of the day. It was draped on the couch between the safety of the drawer and the pile of things to go. So part of me was occupied with What made you pull that sweater from the bottom of the drawer and even consider giving it away? And the other part of me was just as insistent. You haven't worn that sweater in 2 years. What are you hanging on to it for? But once the very idea of giving it away nudged itself through the crack in the door, and despite all my immediate resistance, I found myself heading with it toward the giveaway pile, and I laid it down. Then the oddest thing happened. I hesitate to say that I felt instantly happy, in part because it's a little too pat, and you might find it suspect given that I'm speaking to you today about why I give to Fountain Street Church. But I'm telling you, I felt instantly lighter. And on the other side of that decision, wondered how I could have ever hesitated. I could say, well, it was the relief of making the decision. And I do think that's true, but it's not the whole story. The lightness seemed to come from a different place, not the logical, rational state that comes out of making a reasonable decision. I have plenty of sweaters, other people could use a sweater. Because it's not the logical, reasoned argument that will get to us, is it? We know we have to financially support an institution like Fountain Street Church if we want the riches we find here to continue. That's the logical thought. But what about that feeling? Maybe Matthew Ricard, the molecular biologist turned Buddhist monk, has it right. And here's a quote. Altruism, according to Ricard, does not require that we sacrifice our own happiness. In fact, a benevolent frame of mind, which is based on a correct understanding of the interdependent reality, leads to a win-win situation. We flourish, and at the same time, we are of benefit to all those around us. Giving makes you happy. Who knew? And then I had this thought. Giving items away I no longer needed or wanted, things I was ready to give up, certainly made me feel lighter. That was like unburdening myself. But giving up something that I still had an attachment to was a little harder. And that giving away really lightened me up. So I think I have to say it really did make me very happy. And I urge you to consider that wonderfully strange alchemy between giving and receiving and happiness. So whether you are a newcomer or have been coming here for years, we welcome you to Fountain Street Church. You belong here. Thank you.
I gave you all I have inside. You took my love. You took my love. Didn't I tell you what I believe? Did somebody say that a love like that won't last? Didn't I give you all that I got to give, baby? I keep crying for you. I keep trying for you. Well, there's nothing like you. when you came my way. Oh, you brightened every day with your smile, with your smile. Didn't I tell you what I believe? Did somebody say that a love like this can last? Didn't I give you all that I've got? Oh, baby, this is no ordinary love. It's no ordinary love. This is no ordinary love.
I am so looking forward to the Mendelssohn. This is personal. When I was in seminary, I made a little bit of money by being the assistant, one of three assistant conductors for the Chicago Children's Choir. I was really bad at it. But I did it for a year, and this was one of the pieces I had to prepare. So it is not just aesthetically, it is personally attached to my life. And it ends with a beautiful rendering of a wonderful hymn tune, Wie schöne leuchtet der Morgenstern, How brightly shines the morning star, one of my favorite texts and tunes. So I am completely jazzed by the choir doing this today. I wanted you to be jazzed too, that's the point. But before that, I think it's appropriate in Advent to lift up a few passages that have come to be culturally prominent or deserve to be. They express our sense of the season. And each one will reflect one of the themes of Advent at Fountain Street Church. This week is about faith. The following appeared in the New York Sun in September of 1897. It begins, "We take pleasure in answering at once and thus prominently the communication below, expressing at the same time our great gratification that its faithful author is numbered among the friends of the Sun." Dear editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Signed, Virginia O. Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street, New York, New York. Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be that is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is but an insect, an ant, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by any intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know that these abound and give your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to try and catch Santa Claus, but even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not, but that is not proof they are not there. Nobody can imagine and conceive all the wonders that are unseen and unseeable in the world. You may tear apart the baby's rattle to see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men in the world who ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that veil and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond. Is it at all real? Ah, Virginia, in all this world, there is nothing else real and abiding. No Santa Claus. Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood.
There shall a star come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. There shall a star come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise, a scepter shall rise out of Israel. A star there shall a star out of Jacob, a star shall a star come out of Jacob, with might destroying princes and cities, with might destroying princes and cities. With might destroying princes and cities. With might destroying
In the Revised Common Lectionary, there is a passage from the letter that Paul wrote to the community of Jesus followers. We call it a church, but that implies a building and a committee and budgets. These were just a few people who were trying very hard to understand this powerful message. They lived in Thessalonica, which is well north in modern Greece. He wrote 2 letters to them, and in this one, a very brief one, he has just a few words to say, of which these are fewer still. How can we thank God enough for you in return for all the joy we feel before our God because of you? Night and day we pray most earnestly that we may see you face to face and restore whatever is lacking in faith. A very common greeting when you think about it. If you read Paul's letters, they often begin with a kind of, "Dear so-and-so, how have you been? Please kiss the kids, give them my love." Really, truly. I urge you to read them not for their doctrine, but for their humility. In the Jewish series of readings yesterday in Genesis 32, there came this passage. Most of you have heard it. I'm only going to give you a portion of it. Jacob was left alone. This is out of Genesis. And a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained, that is to say, dislocated, as he wrestled with him. And Jacob was confined to a crutch for the rest of his life. He limped because he had a dislocated hip. God, if you want to say that, basically assaulted Jacob. More currently, in Oklahoma City on December 8th of 2014, the suspect connected to an officer-involved shooting in Oklahoma City died from a gunshot wound to the head. It started around 8:30 p.m. Sunday near Northeast 28th and Laird in Northeast Oklahoma City. Police officers say they were trying to pull the suspect over for a traffic violation, but the man wouldn't stop. Instead, it turned east on North 26th and crashed into the north fence of the Heritage Point Apartments. Police say the driver then took off on foot and ran through the apartment complex. According to police, the suspect, later identified as 39-year-old Jerry Nowlin, brandished a firearm and pointed it at officers. That's when the officers say they shot Nowlin. He was transported to an area hospital where he passed away just before 11 p.m. on Sunday, December 8th, 2014. The 2 officers involved in the shooting were placed on routine administrative leave pending a complete investigation. Every week I remind us that out of sight, and most of us out of mind, there are people of color, who are engaged in interviews with the police, and not all of them come out well. We need to remember this because Black Lives Matter. So when I got here 10 years ago, I was homesick for New York a lot. Who wouldn't be? It's the Big Apple, it's the big cheese, it's the place everybody wants to go, and I had left. But now 10 years later, I'm not homesick for it anymore, and I'm grateful that I am not still there. But now and then a memory comes to call. One of them came to me this week. So my son Stephen, now 24, then 7, we're riding the subway on the Lexington Avenue line, which goes from Brooklyn over to the east side of Manhattan, and we're going to Midtown. It was our custom in those early years for the 2 of us to spend time in the Christmas season looking at the windows that were animated, eating roasted chestnuts, which are never as good as they sound. Look at the tree at Rockefeller Plaza with everybody else, that sort of thing. And of course, we get on the subway. Did I tell you he was 7, right? And when he was 7, he was much more blonde, and his eyes were sparkly blue, and he smiled at just about everyone. The subway's car stops at City Hall. That's the place where all those Law and Order scenes are, and it fills up with people who are commuting and shoppers going uptown like we, and tourists going the same direction. We had seats, so everyone's looming above us, and an old man, a round old man, with a green Tyrolean cap and a snowy white beard, was standing right next to us. Steve looks up at him. and looks at me, looks back at him, looks at me with a quizzical look. I go. He looks back at the man who now notices Stephen looking up, looks down over his glasses, and gravely nods. Stephen looks at me. I go, only in New York. That would not happen in Grand Rapids, I don't think. What is it about our even relentless rationalists that every December we all believe in Santa Claus? In the Unitarian Church of my youth and in that Unitarian home, once it got to be Christmas time, we got out all the carols and we loved all the round virgins and Christ the Lords as much as any Presbyterian. In my early clergy days, though, this felt completely silly and downright hypocritical. All year long, we were atheists from top to bottom, left and right. Then suddenly on the 1st of December, we are festooning ourselves with holly and singing all about Christ in, 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. What preposterous hypocrisy this is. And it is. And then we had children. The famous editorial I read today, prompted by Virginia O'Hanlon's letter, appeared, as I said, in September of 1897. The editor who wrote it, a fellow named Francis Church, no less, argued, and I think rather eloquently, that children, in some sense, are our saviors. It is the most reprinted editorial ever. Remember what he said, without them there would be no childlike faith, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal life with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. A late colleague of mine said it in a different way, which words I have read almost every Christmas Eve I have ever served, that we should withdraw from the cold and barren world of prosaic fact, if only for a season, that we may warm ourselves by the fireside of fancy. We think and we say that it is to protect children that we believe in Santa Claus, but we're really doing it for ourselves, for the child still within us that refuses to give up entirely the possibility that something larger than we think is present in the world. Something precious is at stake for us, far more than for children. Something even unbelievers believe. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see, says Editor Church. He mentions love, generosity, and devotion. But what about those great words from the Declaration of Independence? Things like equality and inherent rights. Can you see them? Can you touch them? Can they be measured? We could add words like liberty and justice for all and beauty and love. All of these things that are so dear to us cannot be seen or heard or touched or measured. They can't be smelled or tasted. In this church, Advent has been devoted for years to faith, hope, love, and joy. Every Sunday that isn't Advent, we would hear about dignity, meaning, worth, and joy. All of these are invisible, impossible to sense or see, unavailable to measure or prove. The only evidence we have that these things exist is that we believe in them. 3 days before leaving for college, now it is no longer Advent, I'm helping you make that transition. 3 days before leaving for college, it is summer, and I'm lying in my bed in Detroit. My parents had moved there the same summer I was going away to college. We had gone from Baltimore to Detroit, and I was off to St. Louis. I was starting a new life, and I can't sleep. For 3 nights in a row, I lie awake until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, drifting off only as the sky begins to brighten. The first night was annoying. The second night was troubling. By the third night, I'm terrified. Instead of looking forward to a new life like all the other young men and women in my life, I am now filled with terrible dread. Dread that I will get to college, be unable to sleep, won't pass my test, will fail, will flunk out, and be drafted. Which is not a laughing matter in 1971. My fresh start, my new life became a tailspin of failure and defeat before I'd even gotten there. And so began a lifelong dance struggle with insomnia. It continues even now, although 40 years later, I have gotten the better of it more often than not. Like Jacob, I have spent many nights wrestling with that dark angel. And though you cannot see it, I have dislocated my soul in the process. My crutch is that I never took a course offered before 10 a.m., so I gave up on lots of good courses. I don't stay out late, so I didn't become a hail fellow well met then or now. And I still avoid suspenseful movies on principle and never after dinner. And you know something? I hate 11 p.m. Christmas Eve services. And I am terrified of Easter sunrise services. These are not confessions of strength or of confidence. I admit them with the knowledge that each and every one of us has a soft place we would rather not see or at least share in public. And yet these things are part of who we are. That first night in the dorm with a new roommate, talk about another night I would not sleep, I got out a book for one of my courses and said, well, if I can't sleep, at least I can study. Silly me, I got out Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus. I was going to be intellectual, remember? Did you ever read the first 3 or 4 lines? I did. There is only one really serious philosophical question, and that is suicide. Deciding whether or not life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question of philosophy. This is either the very best or the very worst thing you can read when you can't sleep. Because in the end, those 2 sentences became the foundation of my spiritual life. Though it was not evident for many years, I am quite sure that every day we don't take our lives. We decide that life matters, at least for a day. For ourselves, and if we are alert, for others too. Every day we don't cash it in or cash anybody else in. We are voting without any proof that it's worthwhile, that life is worth it, even if we can't explain why. We believe life matters, the same way we believe love matters, that beauty exists, not because there's any proof, but because we need them to. Every other belief we have starts with this belief that life matters. Yes, liberty and justice, love, beauty, God, Jesus, whatever you want to call it, they all come after that first decision you make when you get up in the morning. They only matter if we've already decided life itself matters. Thomas Aquinas, Al-Ghazali, Moses Maimonides, whole seminaries worth of luminaries all rest on this thing that we do every day without even thinking about it. Or maybe you do. I assure you, we insomniacs, we think about it. Faith is the evidence of things unseen, as we know from Scripture. That is the first of our Advent themes. It's right up there on the banner. Faith at its simplest is to trust. Trust in something. To be faithful as in fidelity. To be committed to something or someone. And dignity, that other thing we talk about a lot around here, what is that but faith applied to oneself? To trust that I matter, you matter. That something unseen and unprovable exists, and from that belief, all the other beliefs, including the belief that I will get up, that I will eat breakfast, and I will work. Last week I mentioned Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative because my utmost desire is to bore you to tears. No, because we forget these important principles are at stake, and they can't all be boiled down to little apothegms and slogans that can be repeated in your car with the tape playing. It's the idea that we should treat everyone as if they were an end in themselves, not just a means to an end. That other person means as much as you do. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, and I'm paraphrasing, never forget that you are a unique and unrepeatable instance of creation, and never forget that everyone else is too. Our dignity and faith exist only to the extent that we give assent to it, which is not easy, as the horrors of genocide and war and hatred throughout history have demonstrated, and also today. I did a little research. Do you know there are more slaves today than there ever were when it was legal? Between 27 and 30 million people are held in some form of slavery. Chattel slavery is one of them. Debt slavery. 1/4 of them are sexual slaves. 1/4. Think about 7 to 8 million people. Another 1/4 are children, and sadly, those are not different quarters. There are a dozen wars going on the planet right now. I mean, officially, I'm not counting the insurgencies and the backwater fights. 125,000 people die every year in official wars. Poverty is shrinking. We should acknowledge that. But that only means with only 50% of the world's population are still officially poor, and half of those are extremely poor, living on less than $1.90 a day. I mentioned Black Lives Matter because being black means, in this country, you have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. Who has that chance in this room if you're white? Not so much. You're more than 3 times more likely to be searched if stopped, and you're more than 3 times more likely to enjoy a baton or a chokehold if you're black and the police have decided to detain you. Hooray, same-sex marriage is legal, unless you're a Utah judge that decides even legally married lesbian couples shouldn't be bringing up children. He was reversed on that, but he did do it notwithstanding. And we all heard about the rising mortality rates for men in my generation that seem to be correlated with despair and resignation. Yeah, these times, they may be better in some ways, but they're still not great. And all one needs to do is look at the popularity of a candidate who cultivates resentment, insults whole classes of people, and bases it all on falsehoods, all to ever greater acclaim, and that would suggest that we are not at all sure that some lives, really matter. What do you do with that? The phone rang, I think it was around midnight, on one cold winter night when I lived in Chicago. I was a newlywed. That meant my wife was too. It roused me from slumber. Remember what I told you about sleep? I had been asleep basically about an hour, and in my experience, if I wake up within an hour of falling asleep, I'm awake. The call was from a friend who needed help because a third mutual friend was having a psychotic episode. It was too cold and snowy to get to the hospital, and we had a car. Could I come and drive them? I sputtered angrily as I put on my clothes. I bundled myself up and I drove off. We got to the first hospital and we waited an hour before there was no room at that inn. We drove north to a second hospital. No beds there either. And eventually, after starting in Hyde Park, which is on the south side, we ended up at a hospital in Evanston at 4 a.m, where they finally found a room and a place for our friend. And so Nan and I drove south down the Lakeshore Drive before the crowd started. And there on the edge of the lake, you could see it was just a little bit more blue than the rest of the sky. I wasn't happy. I was miserable. I had been deprived of a night of sleep, and once you have one bad night as an insomniac, you can chalk up 3, 4, or 5 after that. I crawled into bed grumbling and grousing that my life was going to be miserable for days thereafter. Well, maybe it was the lunacy of all the night along with the fatigue, but I fell asleep. And I slept a few hours, not enough. Nan and I talked to each other the next day, and we laughed at the folly we were on last night and felt bad for Cindy, our friend. And now when I see Nan 40 years later, we still laugh about it. I didn't want to do it. I resented it. I feared it. But friends were in need. I had a choice. I could value no one's life or just my own, but once you believe your life matters, it's really hard to say everybody else's life doesn't. And what's more, once I was awake, I knew I was going to be awake anyway. I have a story of friendship, not a story of sleeplessness. As we went from one inhospitable hospital to another inhospitable hospital, we thought of Mary and Joseph. No, we did not save the world. No wise men showed up. There were no stars to guide our way, no shepherds as we drove. But Cindy was our friend. Maybe we could help her. And maybe some days is just what you need to keep on believing. And if we're honest, it's all we ever really have. The good news is, it's always enough. May these words of my heart and the meditations of my mind be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.
May this Advent season call you to faithfully seek the dignity that is inherent in every human life. And I call you, having heard this message today, to seek that not only in yourself, but in those who are most other among us. May indeed be this faithful seeking of the dignity of all humanity that allows Christmas to come for one and for all. May it be so. Shalom. Peace be with you.